Hi guys, today we are doing 4.3. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to have a blank piece of paper and on the top put 4.3. 4.3 is really short. It has one basic topic and it's about two lines being parallel. So it says if two lines are parallel, then ... Go ahead and write that down on your piece of paper. Of course, pause the video if you need more time. So I have this picture here, and I'm looking at it, and currently I don't know if any of the lines are parallel. How would I know if lines are parallel? Well, I would need to mark something on them. I would have to mark the little arrows. Just like this. Now I know which two are parallel. This line is parallel to that line. Now what this rule is going to say is if the two lines are parallel, then the corresponding angles are congruent. The corresponding angles are congruent, meaning that they're equal. So what we want to do is we want to go ahead and label all of our angles here. We have the 4 in this group and the 4 in that group. So I'm going to label this 1, 2, 3, 4. You go ahead and do that as well. 5, 6, 7, 8. Make sure you have your little arrows. Make sure you write this sentence down. The corresponding angles are congruent. So looking at this picture, I want to identify which ones are corresponding. Angle 1 and angle 5 are corresponding. They're both above the transversal line. Here's my transversal line. They're both above it and to the left of the parallel line. So we can now say that angle 1 is congruent to angle 5. And that goes for all of my corresponding angles. Angle 2 is going to be congruent to angle 6. 2 and 6 are corresponding, so they are congruent. The next, our angle 3, is congruent to angle 7, and angle 4 is congruent to angle 8. Please write all of those down. So the next thing that this rule says is that if you have two parallel lines, again, of course, with the arrows, all my angles are already labeled, you can also say that the alternate interior angles are congruent. That the alternate, please write this down, the alternate interior angles are congruent. So looking at my picture, the alternate interior angles would be angle 2 is congruent to angle 7. Here's the transversal line. They're on alternate sides of the transversal line, one's above, one's below, but they're in between the two parallel lines. And there's another pair. There's angle 5 is going to be congruent to angle 4. These are the alternate interior angles. Now if two lines are parallel, then the corresponding angles are congruent, the alternate interior angles are congruent, so of course the alternate exterior angles are also congruent. The alternate exterior angles are congruent. This would be angles 1 is congruent to angle 8. And angle 3 is congruent to angle 6. So the last part of the lesson says that, again, if two lines are parallel, the lines have to be parallel for these to work, then the consecutive interior angles. Now the consecutive interior angles is going to be different than all the other ones. The consecutive interior angles are not congruent. If you're looking at angles 2 and 5, angle 2 and angle 5 will not be congruent. They are supplementary. So make sure you're writing everything that I write down on your notes. They're supplementary. Now remember, supplementary means you add them to equal 180. So how are we going to use this? We're going to use this to say that angle 2 plus angle 5 equals 180 degrees. And also angle 4 plus angle 7 is going to equal 180 degrees. So here's a quick example for you guys. Go ahead and draw this picture down. I have my two parallel lines, which I can see with my little parallel markings, and I know that this angle up here is 130 degrees. If I know this one's 130 degrees, from what we've learned earlier, I can figure out what all the other angles are. So the first one that I immediately know is the one opposite it. These are vertical angles, so that also has to be 130 degrees because they're vertical. I know the one adjacent to it, the one next to it is linear, right? They're a linear pair, which means they're supplementary. So 180 is the total, and if I do 180 minus 130, that's 50 degrees. So this one has to be 50 degrees, which means its vertical angle also has to be 50 degrees. These are things we already know. Now we can apply it to this group of angles down here. Okay, so if this one's 130, the corresponding angle also has to be 130 degrees. Corresponding angles are congruent. Now, if the corresponding angles are congruent, we also learned alternate interior angles are congruent. So this 50 and this 50, this would also have to be 50 degrees because they're alternate interior angles. We also learned that alternate exterior angles are congruent. Alternate exterior angles, the 130 and the 130 degrees are alternate exterior angles. And the 50 means that this would also have to be 50 degrees. The last rule we had learned was about consecutive interior angles. The two inside have to add to equal 180, which we can see because 130 plus 50 has to equal 180 degrees. And this is how it will always work.